The Arctic was supposed to be Russia's unbreakable fortress. For a decade, they layered it with S-400 and S-500 batteries, MiG-31 interceptors, and radar nets built to kill stealth fighters. The entire defense plan assumed one thing: no American jet could survive that corridor. But last month, a single aircraft proved them wrong: the F-47. A fighter so advanced it doesn't just penetrate Russia's Arctic shield, it ignores it. On March 21st, 2025, the Air Force awarded Boeing a $20 billion contract to build it. The F-47, a jet that had already flown in secret years before the world even knew it existed. And here's the thing, Russia spent over a decade fortifying the Arctic against the F-22 and the F-35. They never planned for something they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't outrun. So how did America build an aircraft that makes an entire Arctic fortress obsolete overnight? To understand why the F-47 is a nightmare for Moscow, you have to look at a map. The Arctic isn't just ice and polar bears, it's the shortest flight path between North America and Russia. A bomber launched from Alaska can reach Moscow faster than one launched from Europe. And for the past decade, Russia has turned that frozen corridor into a kill box. They built the Rogachevo Air Base on the Novaya Zemlya archipelago. They layered the entire approach with S-400 and S-500 missile batteries, some capable of targeting stealth fighters at 600 kilometers. They forward-deployed MiG-31 interceptors, aircraft designed to sprint into the high Arctic and engage anything before it crosses Russian airspace. And they did this for one reason: Moscow knew that America's stealth advantage was aging. The F-22 Raptor, still the deadliest air superiority fighter on Earth, has a combat radius too short to reach deep into that corridor without refueling. Tankers are slow, vulnerable, and light up radar screens. And the F-35, while stealthy and networked, was never designed to fight alone against layered integrated air defenses covering hundreds of miles. So Russia built a fortress calibrated specifically against the two American stealth platforms they could study, analyze, and model. They spent years cataloging radar returns, refining engagement envelopes, and training operators to hunt jets they believed they understood. But here's the thing: Russia wasn't building their fortress in secret. We watched them do it. They assumed we had nothing that could defeat it. They were wrong. Because while Russia was pouring billions into Arctic concrete and missile batteries, something was happening in a classified hangar in the United States. The Next Generation Air Dominance Program, NGOD, a project so secret that for years even its name was classified. And buried inside that program was a full-scale demonstrator aircraft that began flying around 2020. Hundreds of flight hours logged before a single photograph leaked. The Air Force didn't just test a new jet, they validated an entirely new category of fighter. And on March 21st, 2025, they finally revealed it to the world: the F-47. Built by Boeing under a $20 billion engineering and manufacturing development contract. But the price tag only tells part of the story. The real shock is what this aircraft does. Air Force Chief of Staff General David Alvin called it the most advanced, lethal, and adaptable fighter ever developed. President Trump said it has state-of-the-art stealth technologies, making it virtually unseeable. Unseeable, that's not an exaggeration, that's a deliberate choice of words. Because the F-47 doesn't just match the stealth profile of an F-22 or an F-35, it operates in a regime those aircraft can't touch. The combat radius alone rewrites Arctic strategy. Over 1,000 nautical miles without refueling. From Elmendorf-Richardson Air Force Base in Alaska, an F-22 would need tanker support to reach the Novaya Zemlya corridor and return. Tankers are massive radar targets. They force a stealth fighter to operate inside a predictable logistics chain, but the F-47 eliminates that vulnerability. It can launch from Alaska, penetrate the heart of Russia's Arctic air defense network, and return without ever needing to rendezvous with a tanker. That alone makes it a nightmare for Moscow. But the range isn't even the worst part. The F-47 doesn't fly alone. It's the centerpiece of a family of systems that includes collaborative combat aircraft, AI-enabled drone wingmen. These aren't just additional missiles in the air. Each drone carries sensors, electronic warfare pods, and weapons. They fan out ahead of the manned fighter, forming a distributed radar web across hundreds of miles. If a hostile battery locks on, a drone can absorb the shot. If a gap in coverage appears, another drone fills it, and the F-47 pilot commands the entire swarm from the cockpit like a conductor leading an orchestra. Russia's Arctic Fortress was designed to detect, track, and kill individual stealth fighters. It was never designed to face a networked swarm that thinks, adapts, and sacrifices pieces of itself to protect the core platform. Here's the pivot that should terrify Moscow. The S-400 and S-500 systems ringing the Arctic coast were calibrated against known stealth signatures. Russian engineers spent years studying the F-22 and F-35. They built radar libraries, trained algorithms, and designed engagement envelopes specifically for those aircraft. But the F-47 signature is unknown. Every angle, every coding, every thermal management trick is new, and Russia can't update its sensor libraries for an aircraft it has never seen, never captured on radar, and never modeled in a simulation. They built a billion-dollar fortress against a threat they understood, and now the threat has changed completely. The invisible wall that once protected Russia's northern flank has a door, and they don't know where it is. And then there's the speed. Because the F-47 broke a barrier that physicists said was impossible for stealth fighters, and that changes everything. For decades, the rule was absolute: speed or stealth. Pick one. Push a stealth aircraft past Mach 2 and the skin heats up. Radar-absorbing coatings begin to fail. Infrared sensors light you up like a flare. The F-22 Raptor, still the most advanced air superiority fighter ever built, barely touches Mach 2.25 under ideal conditions, and even then, it doesn't live there. The F-35 tops out closer to Mach 1.6, so Russia built its entire Arctic defense strategy around that speed ceiling. They calculated interception windows, they programmed missile envelopes, they trained operators to hunt fighters that couldn't outrun their radars. Then the F-47 flew past all of it. The breakthrough begins with propulsion. The adaptive engine inside the F-47 can reconfigure itself mid-flight. In one mode, it's a high-efficiency power plant optimized for range and fuel economy. In another, it shifts airflow paths to deliver maximum combat thrust without relying on afterburners. That means sustained Mach 2 plus performance without the infrared spike that normally accompanies it. But propulsion alone doesn't solve the heat problem. Material science does. The F-47 incorporates ceramic matrix composites that withstand temperatures hundreds of degrees hotter than traditional alloys. Its radar-absorbent coatings aren't the polymer-based materials that degrade under stress. They're advanced ceramics and nanostructured formulations that maintain electromagnetic absorption even at elevated temperatures. And inside the airframe, a thermal management system works like a heat sink, redistributing thermal loads through internal cooling channels and fuel-based heat exchangers. The aircraft doesn't just hide from radar, it hides from infrared sensors too. The S-500 Prometheus, Russia's most advanced surface-to-air missile system, was explicitly marketed as a stealth killer. Moscow claims it can track and engage F-22s and F-35s at ranges up to 600 kilometers. But here's the problem they can't solve. The S-500 was calibrated against stealth signatures it could study, model, and catalog. The F-47's thermal and radar profile is completely unknown. Russian sensor libraries have no reference point. Detection is only the first step in a multi-link targeting chain, and without a reliable engagement quality track, a missile launch is just a guess. And in the time it takes to guess, the F-47 is already through the gap and gone. Wait, it gets worse for Moscow. Earlier this year, Ukraine destroyed an S-500 related radar system in Crimea, and the same Prometheus system failed to protect the Kerch Bridge from an AT-CM strike. The weapon that was supposed to neutralize American air power couldn't even defend a static bridge against a tactical ballistic missile. Russia's Arctic fortress looks invincible on paper. In practice, it's never been tested against a threat it doesn't understand. And the F-47 doesn't enter that airspace alone. Every manned fighter commands a swarm of collaborative combat aircraft. The Air Force is spending $8.9 billion through 2029 to field over 1,000 of these AI-enabled drone wingmen. They spread out, form a distributed sensor web, carry extra weapons, jam enemy radars, and absorb shots meant for the piloted aircraft. A single F-47 with 4 drones doesn't look like one threat on a radar screen. It looks like 5, then 3, then 2, then something else entirely. Russian operators trained to count and classify individual contacts suddenly face a shape-shifting network they can't resolve. And all of this, the stealth, the speed, the drones, the thermal masking, was validated years before the public announcement. A full-scale demonstrator flew hundreds of hours in complete secrecy. While analysts debated what sixth generation might look like, America was already flying it. Russia's decade-long Arctic buildup assumed a window of vulnerability that had already closed. They never knew the window was gone, so now the balance has tilted. Russia spent billions fortifying a corridor against aircraft it understood. The F-47 is not that aircraft. The fortress has a door, and the United States holds the key. But here's the question that matters most. What happens when Russia adapts? Because history says they will. The reality is, Russia's adaptation isn't coming fast. It's not because they lack engineers or ambition. It's because the problem has fundamentally changed. You can't counter a platform you've never tracked, never analyzed, and never modeled. The F-47's radar cross-section, its thermal signature, its electronic warfare emissions, all of it is a black box to Moscow. And building a new sensor library isn't a matter of weeks or months. It's years of painstaking data collection under real combat conditions. The F-47 demonstrator was flying back in 2020, 5 years of flight data before the public even knew the program existed. That means America didn't just build a new jet, it built an entirely new threat profile while Russia was still calibrating its defenses against the F-22. The fortress wasn't just obsolete on day one, it was obsolete before it was even finished. But there's another layer to this. One most analysis misses. The F-47 isn't a finished product. It's designed as a digital Century Series platform. Increment 1, the aircraft rolling out near the end of this decade, is just the starting point. The Air Force structured the program for rapid iteration, model-based testing, and accelerated manufacturing. That means as Russia studies and adapts over the next decade, the F-47 will already be evolving into new variants with different signatures, different capabilities, and different tools. The fortress is chasing a target that won't stay still. And then there's the cost. The sticker price on one F-47 is estimated around $300 million. For context, an F-35 costs about $80 million. Critics argue that's unsustainable, but that argument misses what the F-47 replaces. It doesn't just replace a fighter jet, it replaces the tanker fleet needed for the F-22. It replaces the risk of losing pilots in deep penetration missions. It replaces the uncertainty of whether an aging stealth platform can survive against modern integrated air defenses. And each F-47 commands a swarm of drones that multiply its combat power without multiplying the number of pilots. The economics change when you look at the system, not just the airframe. Russia understands this math. It's why they've been probing US airspace more aggressively, joint bomber patrols with Chinese aircraft, probing incidents near Alaska. They're testing our defenses while trying to collect anything they can on what might be out there. But they've never encountered the F-47. And they won't, not on terms that benefit them. The first time they see it operationally, it will already be inside their decision loop, inside their kill chain, and inside their territory. That's not a prediction. It's the inevitable outcome of a jet that can fly faster, farther, and quieter than anything they've prepared for. The central promise made at the start of this story was this: the F-47 broke cover over the Arctic, and Russia has no reply. That promise resolves here, not with speculation, but with hardware. A fully funded, flight-tested, production-bound aircraft that renders a decade of Russian defense spending strategically misaligned. The Arctic fortress still stands, but the door is open, and the United States can walk through it whenever it chooses. The real question now isn't whether Russia can adapt. It's whether they can afford not to, because every ruble spent trying to catch up is a ruble not spent on the next threat, and by the time they close one gap, the F-47 will have already opened another. Here's the surprising detail most people don't know. The Air Force didn't just quietly build one demonstrator under the classified NGAD program. Multiple airframes were developed and tested by competing teams before Boeing won the contract. That means the United States didn't just have a secret jet. It had options, and the version we're seeing now is the winner of a secret competition, a competition Russia never even knew was happening. The Arctic game has changed. And the final lesson is this: deterrence doesn't require perfection. It requires capability and credibility. The F-47 delivers both, and Moscow now has to rewrite their entire northern defense strategy against an opponent they can't see and can't outrun. Which brings us to the final chapter. What does this mean for the balance of power over the next decade, and what does it mean for the pilots who will actually fly this machine into the world's most heavily defended airspace? For the pilots, this changes everything. They're no longer just flying a fighter. They're commanding a network, managing drones, processing sensor data from 5 platforms at once, making decisions at speeds that used to belong to machines. The cockpit of the F-47 isn't a cockpit, it's a battlefield command center. And the pilots who step into it won't just be the best stick and rudder aviators, they'll be tacticians, data analysts, and autonomous systems operators rolled into one. The balance of power over the next decade doesn't just tilt because of hardware. It tilts because the people flying that hardware are operating on a different plane entirely. Russia and China will adapt, they always do. But catching up to a moving target costs more than building a static fortress ever did. And as the Arctic corridor transforms from a Russian kill box into contested airspace where the United States holds the initiative, the message is clear: the sky hasn't changed, but everything in it has. If you want to understand what comes next, subscribe and hit the bell. We're tracking every move.